Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Melrose, assisting pastor for pastoral care here at First United Methodist Church. The theme of our devotion today, Tuesday, are all these empty spaces. It was just 2 weeks ago, this past Sunday, that the nation paused for moments of silence to remember the 500,000 or so more since then who have lost their lives to the COVID virus. There were remembrances both in Washington and elsewhere, bells tolled. What was written about that event, recalling the lives of those lost, are all of the empty spaces that now exist. It's the empty seat at the dinner table. It's the empty desk or computer in the classroom. It's the empty side of the bed or that bedroom that no longer has an occupant. It is the spaces no longer used or used less. So here at the start of this devotion, we find ourselves in the chapel of First Church, a space that's been empty and is empty most of the time, where we used to do small worship, where there used to be adult education classes, where there used to be time for staff chapel every week, where there were people coming in occasionally to walk the labyrinth. The space is now empty. There are no more art displays on the wall. It continues to exist. It now becomes a place where different ones of us have come up to have a few moments of silence, where we have done devotions from this space. It is a beautiful space, but it has taken on a new meaning. And we may not be clear yet what that meaning is. And so we leave the chapel and we walk through some more empty spaces on this floor. We come to the Chapel Cafe, as it's known, where there used to be time for coffee for staff, for coffee for attendees of Sunday morning classes to gather coffee, for small groups to meet and have a bit of food and fellowship. Fellowship and food, as many have said, Mark has said many times, it's almost as if those are the heart of our faith. Now a space that is pretty much empty most of the time, as is the office corridor, the work of the finance coordinator, the work of our program staff, the work of our 3 pastors are done very differently now. These spaces are empty much of the time, and very seldom do you have more than 1 or 2 spaces, which happily are distant from each other, occupied at any one time. We have continued to see this space as mostly empty most of the time. We continue down the corridor, and the mementos of past times and decorations are here, still in their glory and their beauty, but very few to appreciate them. It's not as if this is a place of mourning, but it is a place that in its emptiness reminds us that we have been in this kind of a time for almost a year, where we aren't here, where the work is done differently, where we have to Zoom as staff for meetings and for smaller discussions. So Mark's office as senior pastor, he comes in maybe once or twice every other week. The main business office off here to my right, just before we take a break to go downstairs, have Walpert, the assistant to the pastors, comes in, but when she comes in, no one else is here, or very seldom. So once again, a large space, but it is empty. Where are the vacant spaces in your life right now? Do you find them in the family, in the extended family, your place of business, in your neighborhood? And of course, as we talk about empty spaces, one of the empty spaces for many of you viewing this devotion today is the empty space of the physical presence of you here in this building. you're not here at this time. And if you've come by, you maybe have looked at it longingly. This building is only open to very small groups on special occasions if there's a certain need. But remember the Octagon, a place where we used to have come as you are worship and Wednesday breakfasts, a place that was a gathering point for different groups who were talking about ministries and showing off trips that we could take and other such things at the close of worship, in between worship and our coffee hour. And this, of course, was then the pass-through room, the walk-through room, into the fellowship hall. Our fellowship hall now, a vast space. We used it a couple times last fall for small senior gatherings because of weather and the change in the guidelines for COVID. We have not used this in any fellowship kinds of ways. Let me get the lights for you. And you can see it in all of its really beauty and space. Now, Karen Andro and people working with Hope's Home Ministries are using this as a place to store supplies temporarily, in addition to what their storage spaces are downstairs, so that we can move food through here, and rather than feeding people here, out into the community in encampments, taking food to people who are ill and cannot get out of their homes, in some places even to those who are temporarily living in hotels or motels. But here again, a space that was full of people sharing stories. How are you? How is so-and-so? Are she or he in the hospital, or are they home yet? Sharing coffee from our kitchen. All of this is another empty space in our lives physically, and the space is empty because it doesn't have all of us in it. And now let's move down to what many would say is the center of the church, if you will. We'll pass through the corridor on our way to the sanctuary. This would have been a route for the early arrival folk to have coffee at 8:30 and then walk down to the church for the sanctuary for 9 o'clock worship. Or conversely, it would have been a place for the 9 o'clock worshipers to walk opposite from the direction I'm walking in to get coffee, but it was also the direction for folks from Sunday school and late arrivals to get coffee and then come for the 11:15 service. So once again, the history of our church spanning this wall, very few see right now. And the wall behind you, or off to my right, which used to have pictures of our ministries, of our staff, even that is blank at the moment, as if there's nothing happening. And yet, when there is empty space, we find a way to use it. Did you notice the hints upstairs? The chapel might be used for devotions to share with our congregation. Some of the offices are used differently. We come to the sanctuary, and this is really the place where the worship that you see that we're privileged to do on your behalf every Sunday, it still takes place, but very differently, as you will notice. Notice the cameras, the stands for mics, the way that the musical instruments are placed. All of this is put together so that we still may continue to come together, but differently. And then we stop for a minute and pause, because at the center of the sanctuary, at the center of our faith, is the cross. The cross, that which has a ripple effect across the world, across our lives, that which reminds us at the beginning of Lent of emptiness, of silence, of quiet, of a time to face God, a time to remind ourselves who we are in the mystery of how God unfolds life in the world. One of the things that Dr. Fauci said recently is that the sense of mastery over nature has been so seriously challenged by this pandemic. Well, I'm not sure we ever had mastery over nature, but the pandemic has challenged us in so many ways. But look again at the cross. It's almost as if it's a silhouette. If we had different lighting on it, you would see it as a silhouette. The cross is sometimes referred to as a tree. And Parker Palmer, working with some words of Mary Jean Urian, has said that there is in that silhouette something single and noble. You stop there because you must when you walk into this room. It's compelling. It has a space right now of looking dark and melancholy, but there's strength in the way it is exposed and standing there. It stands very strongly. There's no pretense or embellishment. It's just its own truth. Before the eyes of all, it lives the way it is, nothing more. Parker Palmer, reflecting on this, looked at the trees in his neighborhood and he said, "Strip down the trees in my neighborhood remind me of the nobility that comes from embracing loss and still reaching for the sky." Mary Jean Urian, the poet whom he quotes at one point, says, "Stripped of all pretense and embellishment, nothing is there but the tree's own truth." But that's the kind of truth that can set us free, especially in this era of deadly lies. That's the kind of truth that can set us free, especially as we think about our life and God's presence to show us that life is true even in and through the pandemic. It's as if this empty space with just suggestions of how it can move into the future and the firmness of the cross, which is the center of our faith, if you will, is the great reminder. The truth is the reminder. The cross is the reminder of the love of God. The cross lets us know that we can embrace loss and still reach for the sky. May these moments of emptiness be a time for you to spend time with God, with those you care about, to honor the empty spaces. Remember them, remember the life that they were, and remember them in their memories and their own way of being eternal in your life, continuing to bring life to you so that you can embrace this loss and still reach for the sky. Jesus embraced the loss as he went through the 40 days of Lent and through Holy Week. And he was resurrected, not quite reaching for the sky, but that's a symbol for the life that God gives us. Thanks be to God. Amen.